The Cutting Edge is very proud to be with one of America's great heroes. And of course, all heroes don't think they're heroes, and that's kind of real attractive. But anyway, Walt Ehlers, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kansas.
Well, tell us what town. Is that by Lawrence or where?
Junction City, Kansas.
Junction City, Kansas.
Manhattan.
Now, you were born in the 20s, were you?
Born in May the 7th, 1921.
And what was it like growing up in Kansas in those days?
Well, it was, well, the first 10 years of my life was pretty nice because I was very young, you know, and my dad was very prosperous on the farm at that time.
What kind of crops did you have there?
Well, he had all kinds of crops. You know, we called it a self-sufficient farm. You know, in other words, we raised our wheat and our oats and our hay and our alfalfa and all this kind of stuff. This and we had fruit and vegetables, and we had our own gardens and potatoes and things like that.
So growing up in the 30s in Kansas with a farm was a pretty good thing during those Depression years then.
Like I say, well, the first 10 years was fine until my dad bought a farm in 1929. But the first 10 years, he was doing real well because sometimes he was probably making about $10,000 a year. In those days, it's almost unheard of, you know.
Oh, that was a lot of money. Did your mom, was she a stay-at-home mom?
Oh yes, she was. She had to be. She had 3 boys and 3 girls. Of course, my brother Ron was the first one born, and then my brother Klaus, and then myself, and then my sister Leona, and then Marge, and then Gloria.
Now, how many?
I was born in 1929.
So tell us, how many of those siblings have you got are still around with you?
All except my brother.
Is that right? Boy, you got some longevity there in the Ehlers family, huh?
Right.
Now, are you from German extraction, or what do you know?
I'm from German and Irish.
German and Irish.
Irish side, and my dad's the German side.
So what did you do when you went to high school there in Grand Junction, Kansas, and your older brother was with you, and then what was going on in the world in 1940 that made you decide to go in the service of our country?
Of course, you know, I went to high school from 1936 through 1940, and the first 3 years of my high school, I stayed with my grandfather Ehlers because it was close to Junction City, Kansas, and we lived out on a farm and happened to be living in Riley County at that time. And my older brother, by the way, he was working, and so he paid our tuition to go to that school. And so we stayed with our grandfather. Of course, he took care of us there, and we went 3 years to Junction City High School. And while we were staying there, of course, he's the only one in the family that had a radio, and he was a very successful farmer. And we used to listen to the radio. It kept telling us all the time about what was happening in Germany, and then when it came to the thing that they were burning books and things like this, and then when they started burning the Bibles, that became the ultimatum that something had to be done. I'm sure that a lot of people in the United States were expecting the same thing.
So what? So you and your brother decided to go into the Army. Now, why? Everybody that's, of course, we're Army here, but tell us, why did you choose that particular service?
Well, that was the closest one. We went to Fort Riley, Kansas to enlist into the military service. And of course, naturally, you go to Fort Riley, you're going to enlist in the Army.
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you this. So you were kind of taken by the events of the day, were you? And
you know, when I went down to enlist, my brother was, well, actually they started the selective service in 1940,
right.
1940.
Right.
And my brother said he wasn't going to be drafted, he was going to volunteer. And that was natural, you know, for most Americans in those days anyway. And I said, well, I'm going to go with you. So I went with him, and then when I got there, well, they sent me back home to get my dad and mother's signature.
Now, how old were you at that point?
I was 19.
and they still wanted to know that because of your.
Anybody under 21 couldn't smoke, drink, or listen to military service without their parents' signatures.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And so anyway, when I asked my dad and mom to sign, my dad said, "Well, he would sign," but my mother said, "I will only sign on one condition, that you promise to be a Christian soldier." And I was a little bit taken back by it because I knew we were Christians, and we tried to go to church regularly, but out on the farm it's kind of hard to do when you have to go 6 miles to go to church or something like that in the wintertime and things. But we always did our best, and when we didn't go to church, my dad used to read the Bible on Sundays to us.
Right.
Then when I looked in my mother's eyes after she told me that, she had tears in them, and it really stuck with me the rest of my life. And every time I thought I was doing something that she wouldn't approve of, I naturally remembered her, and I wasn't going to dishonor her, and above all, I wasn't going to dishonor God because of what I did.
Well, let's step into this one thing. What date did you finally go into the service?
October 4th, 1940.
So October 4th, 1940. Now, America wasn't at war at that point, were they?
No.
And so it was just something that you felt compelled to do with your brother, and you go.
They were going to. It started the selective service, so we knew that.
Oh, so you were going to get drafted no matter what. Anyway, when did they start that? What year was that?
I was going to get drafted, but
early 1940 is when they started the draft.
No, it was around September, I think. Or
September.
October, yeah.
So it wasn't much after.
The draftees that came into our unit was after we had enlisted in the military services. So it was in late October when we got a bunch of draftees, and they told us that they're going to use the 7th Division instead of being a mechanized outfit that it was supposed to be when we enlisted. That they were going to train selective service people, and they transferred all the regular Army men, and my brother and I were regular Army, so they transferred us out to the 3rd Infantry Division, who wanted regular Army people.
Now let me ask you this. Wait a minute. I want to get out of this important stuff here. When you got drafted regular Army, how many years was that commitment at that point? You remember?
3 years.
So was it 3 years?
For 3 years.
It was for 3 years.
3 years in the duration. They told us that ahead of time because they were pretty sure we were probably going to go to war.
So they were pretty sure it was going to go to war. Now, okay, now I'm trying to get all these timelines tied in together because I think it's for the span of history it's kind of important.
Right.
Between October 4th of 1940, when you went into the service, and December 7th, 1941, when we were attacked by the Empire of Japan, what were you doing? What training did you have, and what were you up to?
When I enlisted, it was in the 17th Infantry Regiment of the 7th Division, and that was at Fort Ord, California. And then they took us out of there because the 7th Division was selected to train the selective service people. And then we went, like we were in Company K of the 17th Infantry Regiment. We went to Company K of the 3rd.
Well, help us out here. What kind of skills were you learning?
Infantry skills.
All right, so you learned how to fire, in those days it was a Springfield 03?
03 and the 45 Colt revolver and the 45 automatic revolver and
some hand grenades.
Well, yeah, we learned how to use hand grenades and things like this, but we didn't have many of those weapons. And so when we got after
Is that the days when they were using kind of cardboard guns and things because they didn't have any?
Actually, at Fort Ord we didn't have that, but when we got transferred to the Company K of the 30th Infantry Regiment, which was then at Presidio, San Francisco, we still were doing amphibious training, things like this, but then they called the regiment to Fort Lewis, Washington, and that was sometime in the first part of 1941.
So where were you on December 7th,
so,
1941? I got to know that.
I was on top of Mount Rainier. And
what were you doing on the top of
that? My brother and I and a couple other guys, we were going to go skiing, and we'd never been skiing before because we came from Kansas and never been on a hill over 200 feet high in our lives before.
Sure.
And we were strapping on these skis when they announced on the radio at the ski shack that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and the message came out that everyone in the military service should immediately return to the military service that was actually on active duty, you know. So we took off our skis, and when I looked down that mountain, it was 8,000 feet down, and I figured, well, that was probably the first day of my life I was saved by the war.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I wanted to ask you, though, is in basic training, everybody that's ever been in the military always complained about their sergeants and the people that gave them training. Were they pretty tough guys that trained you in those days?
You know, we had some old sergeants that were old timers, you know, and
from the first war, huh?
Right, well, I don't know what they were in the first war, but they'd been in the military service 8, 10 years and things like that.
Sure.
They had a lot of time in already, and they were tough. I remember one guy, his name was Russ Saunders, and I think he was a Russian. But anyway, he was very, he was our platoon sergeant, and he was very rough on us. He'd make us set at attention and do double time and everything else if we goofed off.
Well, how'd you do in basic in second 8 weeks, or how long did they have second 8 weeks then?
The basic was done partially at Presidio, Monterey, and then at Camp Ord, California.
Right.
And
did you find that easier to do, or was it tough?
I found it, well, it wasn't tough for, not for us farm boys, it wasn't tough, but it was monotony, and it was dusty, and it was dirty, and we just didn't care very much about the routine, you know.
Right. Okay, so now you're back. You are stationed at this point up in Fort Lewis, Washington, as I think we got that part going. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, December 7th comes. What's the first action that you had to...
Well, the first thing we did, we returned to camp, of course. And when we got back to camp, then they decided to move us out of Fort Lewis, out into the hills, out into the rainforest and places like that up there.
Because they're afraid the Japanese might attack.
The Japanese were going to attack it. And then they got the order to send a regiment up to be at the Air Force base at Bellingham, Washington.
Right.
And so we went up there and we stood guard up there for a while. And when the things didn't look like the Japanese were going to continue their invasion on up through the islands to the, you know, Washington and places like the main part of the United States, they took us back down to the Fort Lewis, and then we went on our amphibious maneuvers and things.
Okay, but let's get to the first big motion from the action here. Now it's what do you remember? What month and year you were moving out of Fort Lewis and all those different training exercises and off on an actual adventure?
Well, actually, from 41 on, we were in heavy amphibious training, jiu-jitsu training and all that kind of stuff, and bayonet training, and we were training for jungle fighting, because we went out and we did maneuvers out in the range.
Well, you thought you were going to go fight the Japanese.
We thought we were going to go to the Pacific anyway.
Right. So what was the, I'm just trying to get a month and year now out of you for when, if you can remember, when you're going to go to the European theater or headed that direction.
That would be through the whole summer. And of course the whole summer was involved in our amphibious training up and down the coast.
Okay, I guess from what we've discovered, you saw some type of action in was it in Sicily? Is that correct?
No, we aren't there yet.
Okay, but I'm just.
Actually, you know, they put us on a train at Fort Ord and they sent us across the country to Camp Pickett, Virginia. And of course that was the worst place that we ever served in our lifetime, because it was so rainy and muddy, and the old clay mud would pick up.
There's some guys at Fort Polk, Louisiana probably can test that.
That's right, I'm sure they could. And so when we got on the boats there, they gave us French translation books, and of course being kind of naive about, you know, the world at that time, when they gave us French translation books, we thought we were going to France.
You know, wait, I got to stop you right there. I got a question to ask you.
Sure.
Everybody would want to know this question. And that is, you know, when you left and you went into the Army, did you leave any girlfriends behind or anybody that you...
I was rather young then. have any girlfriends then.
You didn't have any girlfriends
Not
then?
any fixed girlfriends.
So both you
I
and
had a
your...
lot of friends, but not any.
How about your brother? Did he have a girlfriend that he left behind?
No, he didn't either. He actually he'd been working and up in Wyoming and things like this, and he'd come back and then he decided he wanted to go into the service.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up because there are a lot of people thinking about all these girls you left behind you.
My other brother, my brother Klaus, he went to the Pacific. He did have a girlfriend. They got a marriage license, but they decided not to get married. And he went to the Pacific for 3 years, and he was a machine gunner over there and fought all the way through from Burma through to Leyte and things like that.
Sure.
And the islands.
Yeah.
And he came back in 1945, and he married his girlfriend that was his girlfriend when he went into the service. And they got married with the same marriage certificate they got in 19.
Boy, she was pleased. I'll bet you about that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, listen, we got to move on here because we got lots and lots of ground to cover. I'd like to know just how you got. Let's skip some of the basic trainings and the things that we know that you had. I guess they prepared you pretty darn well to do what you were going to do. And I guess I want to know, when did you go off on that boat trip or plane trip, or how it got on your way to the?
That's October 1942.
Okay, so now you'd been in there for about 2 years. You've been in. You're a 2-year veteran.
2 years. Yeah.
Now, what's your rank by this point?
Still PFC.
You were still after 2 years.
I became a PFC before I became a full-fledged private.
There you go. So did you get it? Did you get in any?
Started out at $21.
I got to ask you, while everybody's going to want to know, did you get in any trouble in those first 2 years?
No, I didn't.
All right.
I was good in school too.
They just weren't good at giving out rank in those days, huh?
It was A's in deportment.
They weren't too big in giving out rank in those days, I guess, huh? Okay, so about October of '42, you're heading off toward North Africa. Is that right?
Yes.
And where was your landfall, and what was all going on?
We were out on the ship. I told you they gave us French translation books.
Sure.
Then when we were out there for 2 weeks, and they finally told us we were going to land in the next couple of days in French Morocco, North Africa. So that's why we found out why we had French translation books, apparently.
Sure.
So we landed at Fadela in north of Casablanca with the 3rd Infantry Division, the 30th Infantry Regiment I was with. And we didn't have too much trouble. I was very seasick when I got there, though.
You probably weren't the only one.
No, I wasn't. When I was out on that ship for about 2 weeks, when they called me in to go do KP, and I went down there, I told the sergeant, I don't think that's a good idea. He said, well, you go anyway. So I went down there, and I go into the mess hall where we're supposed to eat first and then do the KP after the rest of the people. Well, I went down and I looked at that bowl of bean soup floating around with all the grease on top of it.
Right.
I got so sick, I left and I never came back.
Well, let's go. You got to Casablanca, and then you were deployed to.
Oh, in Casablanca, we became an honor guard for the Casablanca conference. Our company was chosen to be the honor guard to stand up and down the street for the approach of President Roosevelt down the street. And when he sees the honor guard and he's coming down the street and he's smoking his old cigar and he's looking to the right and the left, like he does with his hat up, and he says, these are mighty fine-looking troops that make good replacements for the 1st Infantry Division.
And where was the 1st Infantry Division?
Who lost so many casualties at Kasserine Pass.
Kasserine Pass. Now, where's Kasserine Pass for those that don't know?
Kasserine Pass is up in Oran.
In where?
In Oran. Up in northern part. I guess you could call it, I don't know, it's Oran, Algiers, or something like that.
Oh, in Algiers. Okay, Kasserine, just so everybody knows where Kasserine Pass is. Big tank battles up there.
Northern Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some serious tank battles going on there, weren't there?
Well, yes, not so bad. The worst tank battle was when, after we had joined the division, which was in February or March, I think, of 1943.
Right.
And I guess it was February, but we got in a tank battle up in El Qatar, with the Panzer divisions, and the first division.
This is in Morocco, is it, or?
This is in Tunisia.
In Tunisia, okay.
Yeah. And we were.
This is with the terrible Rommel guy?
Oh yes, and they were attacking our positions. We had all of our artillery across the valley down there, and we had infantry regiments on both sides of the valley.
Right.
And, so that they wouldn't try to break through. Of course, they started attacking our hill, and I was in Company K of the 18th Infantry Regiment then. And when they started attacking, they came up in half tracks, and of course we fought them off. I was a mortar section leader then, and I was...
Was this your first taste of battle, sir?
Oh no, we had several firefights before we got there.
Right.
Oh yeah.
But that this was the first major engagement, wasn't it?
That was the first real major engagement with the tanks and the armored infantry assaulting us.
Did you feel? I have to ask you this because, of course, everybody would always wants to know this. But when you're in a large engagement like that, is there a feeling of? In most cases, you feel like did you feel in control or out of control? How did you feel?
Well. I'm not sure who was in or out of control, but I think we were pretty much in control of ourselves as far as what we had to do. What we were trained to do is to repel the enemy, and
right.
So that's what we were doing up on that hill. And when we ran out of mortar ammunition, then I picked up a rifle, went out and was on the front up there on the rocks firing with the Germans too, and we repelled them that day, and by the next by that night we were all out of ammunition. Our artillery was running out of ammunition. They spiked some of their guns, but when the tanks were attacking them, they were coming at them and they were shooting artillery, 155 houses, point blank at the tanks.
Wow.
And that's how close they were.
Wow.
And then somehow or other, with our repulsion of the Germans on that hill, and then the other hills around them, and then the tanks being stopped by the artillery, they started withdrawal. Of course, Patton's 3rd Armored, I guess, came up in there and was following them up through the valley, but we went on following them too the next day. But that morning when they went up and counted the bodies on the hill, that they found over 200 German bodies. And Company K got their first presidential unit citation on that.
Wow. How many guys did you lose in that engagement?
Well, we didn't lose any of my group, but our company lost about probably around 18, 20 guys.
Wow. So, everybody, no one all of your friends out there that have experienced the flush of battle, what it feels like, it's very difficult for you to express that kind of feeling when you know that your life could be snuffed out at any moment.
Well, that's right, but you had to have a lot of faith and faith in yourself and faith in your men around you and so forth.
Right.
And it wasn't the idea of being afraid of dying, it was the idea of wanting to live and fighting to live. And that's what we were doing. We weren't worried about it. We weren't concentrating on dying, we were concentrating on living, and so while you're concentrating on living, you're doing the job that you have.
We have to move on pretty quickly because we've got so many things about the Mr. Walt Ehlers we want to talk about that we're going to have to skip over some major things, and so I hope you'll bear with us on this.
Sure.
There was a guy by the name of George S. Patton that I guess you served under or knew about?
We went with his armored division, different battles and things like that.
So this was in Sicily that you...
and first time in Africa, then the second time, of course, after the war was over in Africa, then we went on to Sicily, and we landed at Gela, Sicily in July 1943. And we, actually, I never got to see much of Patton until after the war was over. Well, it was almost over, I guess. But we had a talk. Patton gave a talk to a group of us.
So you were one of the famous soldiers that got the apology?
Well, no, he wasn't apologizing then. He didn't have anything to apologize about. But, he got into that slapping incident after that, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but anyway,
I kind of respected Patton because number one, he actually was a Christian, and he was, he's an only $1 a year man, and he was out there and he was fighting for his country, and he expected, and he had an eagle. There's no doubt about that. But it was in the right place because the enemy was trying to kill Americans, and that's exactly what he was trying to do to them, is to get rid of them.
From purely a soldier's point of view, I'd like to just know, was there scuttlebutt over there when Montgomery and he were having their little tiffs together and things like that? And
well, I think that we fought alongside the English in England. I mean, in Sicily, and they're nice soldiers and so forth, but they're not as aggressive as the Americans were, and we didn't think they were anyway. Maybe they thought we weren't as aggressive as they were either, but on the other hand, we figured that was Montgomery's fault.
Okay.
And our aggressiveness was Patton's fault.
Okay, we're going to do something.
We were doing what Patton, as a good soldier, would want us to do.
We're gonna do something that's real interesting. We're gonna skip over now some of the major things that happened to you after this. After you were in North Africa and also in Sicily. Okay. We're gonna kind of skip that middle part there, and then we're gonna come back to when did you come back to the United States? From the war over, or
no, we went from Sicily to England.
No, I understand that, but I'm talking about after.
Way back.
I'm talking about skipping way ahead now, okay. And I
came back to the United States in September 1945.
September of 45. So August of 45 was.
I did get. You see, the story is getting distorted here.
No, it's not. I'm just. What I want to do.
Because I did come back to the United States in 1944.
Understood. We know about that. I want to save that. That's our big deal here. We're going to do about. But this we're talking about sort of after victory in Europe, and that's in August of 45, and you came back in September. What did you go back home to Grand Junction, Kansas?
Manhattan, Kansas. So
Manhattan,
my parents
Kansas.
were living there.
Okay, so they moved there.
And I was living in Manhattan myself before I went into service. That's the reason they give me credit for coming from Manhattan.
Right.
And so Manhattan's hero, hometown hero or something.
Right.
But I went to Junction City for 3 years and Raleigh for 1 year. So
right.
I really was, the only attachment I had to Manhattan was that I was living in Manhattan when I enlisted into the military service.
Everybody wants to know, was this a big hero's welcome for you when you got back?
Yes, it was, yes.
And so did they have bands and playing? And
they brought the Army Jeeps down, and then I rode down Points Avenue in Manhattan, Kansas, and things like that. And
they give you the keys to the city and all that?
Yeah, I got the keys to the city. The American Legion was there and all that. I got a life membership in the American Legion and all that kind of stuff.
So what was
I went to the ball game at Kansas State University, and then it was just Kansas State. In Manhattan there, and they won the game that night. And I also went to one of the girls' clubs there in Manhattan.
You didn't have any problem finding girlfriends about that time?
No.
Well, so now I'm going to just keep going on this little track now. So you got home in September of 45. When did you get married?
I didn't get married until March the 20th of 1955.
Is that right? So there was a lot of stuff going on for Walt Ehlers between those days then, huh?
Yes.
When did you come out to California?
I came out in 1946.
46. It didn't take you long to leave Kansas.
I was talking to a guy the other day. He told me he had a P-38. I said, when did you fly? He says, yeah. I said, I had a P-38 too, but it flew me out to California because I sold it. He says, you did? I said, yeah, it was a gun.
Well, it's funny. So you came out to California and you found a pretty easy transition from Kansas. Did you like it out here?
Well, first place, when I first came home, then I went to the employment office and I wanted to get a job out in Kansas from a construction company, and I went to the employment office. They said, well, you got to sign up for unemployment insurance first. Yeah. I said, I'm not signed up for unemployment insurance. And they said, well, if you don't, then we can't refer you. I said, well, I'll have to take care of it myself then, because I wasn't going to draw unemployment. And so then I went back working for my uncle for a while, and then.
Okay, we got to skip over that. We got so much to cover, sir. I hate to do this to you, but I will need you back out here in California for just a minute.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I went to work for the VA in Kansas.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In January of '46.
Oh, I got you.
In April '46, I thought it was attack of malaria, and the doctor said I had scarlatina, and so there was discrepancy, and I had to be quarantined for 3 weeks. So I resigned from the VA, and I said, well, I'm going to go to college. And so in the summertime, I enlisted in the college. I went down, took the exam, passed, and everything to go to Kansas State. And I went in there, and I had to be in a room with about over 150 students in one room, you know, and no air conditioning, and then. You know, I've been sleeping out on the ground for about 5 years before that. Outdoor boy, you know. And you get in that room and it's so stuffy and all that. And it's hot in Kansas in the summertime, and that was a mistake.
You had bugs there too, didn't you?
Pardon?
You had a lot of bugs in Kansas in those days.
Well, the bugs didn't bother me. That was normal. But the heat, and then I couldn't get a word in edgewise in the classes or anything like this, so I decided this is not for me. So I quit, and a friend of mine came out from North Carolina. Actually, he was in my squad during after Normandy, you know, and so he and I took a trip, went back to North Carolina and visited his folks, and then went up to Washington to see Washington and Maryland and so forth. Then we came back across. And then we got back to Kansas. I went out and I started farming again. I said, no, I don't like this either. So I had 2 P-38s. I gave one to my brother, and so the other.
That's a Walther P-38.
Yes.
9mm handgun that you took off of some German person.
Well, I don't know how I got it, but I got it. So.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, we've got to skip ahead here. I know it's a little thing here, because I need to know that how you got. We found out that you were with the Veterans Administration out here in California for about what, 35 years?
Yeah, I went when I got after I came off my trip. We came out to California.
Right.
That's how I got out here.
Great.
I just wanted to point out the fact that I didn't have a lot of money or anything, and so I got out to California and I didn't have a job, and so I knew that I was going to have to get a job because I wouldn't be able to survive. And so I went down to the Veterans Administration in Los Angeles at 1380 South Sepulveda Boulevard when it was out there on Sepulveda, and I asked for if I could get my job back with them, and they said, well, of course, you know. So I went in as a GS7 and a contact representative for the Veterans Administration. So I worked for 29 years with the VA.
Wow.
Walt, I got a question for you, and thank you for meeting with us at your home this morning. What is your opinion of the treatment of our vets, having served most of your life dealing with veterans and the issues that they had to deal with?
Well, of course, our veterans have a hard time accepting, life has an order to it, and of course, when the Veterans Administration is administering benefits, they're administering the public funds, and so they're doing it for the best they can for the veterans. And a lot of veterans said, well, the Veterans Administration didn't do it very good, but I can tell you that there's many more testimonies to what the Veterans Administration did for the veterans after they got out of the military service than what they didn't do. Because the very seriously disabled veterans got a lot of care, and they got quite a bit of money for their disabilities and things like this. And they got education, and we had the public law public law 334, something like that. I can't 36.
GI Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. They had the Bill of Rights, and the one was they go to school, and then they had Public Law 16, which was the one for the disabled veterans, and they could go to school, and they got all their tuition, books, and fees paid for. And all these guys who took advantage of the education benefits went on to become lawyers and doctors and a lot of other things throughout the world.
You betcha. You betcha.
Well, do you feel that there's...
And I think we've tried to do a very good job for the veterans throughout.
Are there veterans that you've heard of or know of who have disabilities yet fail to file a claim?
Oh, there's many, well, take it for instance, there's a lot of veterans who had got disability, they got retired from the military service, who had disabilities who were service incurred, and of course that thing is, I think it's just finally been resolved. But when they got out of the service, they got their retirement pay, so they come down to the VA and file for a disability, the service connected. Well, they'd have to waive that portion of their retirement pay that was equal to the amount that the VA was paying. Well, they've kind of changed that law now, and so they should be able to draw both. For instance, a federal employee, like myself, for instance, when I retired from the federal government, I didn't have to waive any of my pay, you know, to get my disability compensation. Well, we got to remember that these guys who put 20 years or 30 years in the military service, they're federal employees too, really. Only they're in a different branch of it. They're in the military service, and they should be treated accordingly. And besides that, they were very low paid when they very first started. You know?
Yeah.
And so they're just as much entitled to compensation for their injuries as anybody else is.
Were you familiar, Walt, with the Agent Orange
Yes,
controversy and also the called the Gulf syndrome? Also, those were two big ones.
It was a syndrome, but there were so many claims filed on it that weren't legitimate. There's a lot of people in Vietnam, just because they're in Vietnam, file a claim for Agent Orange. And if they weren't exposed to it, they weren't eligible. And yet we've had guys claiming, well, I had a man come into my office one time. He said, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I want to file a claim against the government because my child's in the hospital as a disfigured child, you know. And he said this was from Agent Orange. I said, well, did you ever look around in that room in that hospital where your child is and see how many of those guys were veterans who have a disfigured child in that room? He didn't know. And what the point is that it can happen to anybody, whether you're in the service or not. See?
Sure.
And so it has to be proven.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to tell him. And I said, it's not easy. But if you haven't been exposed, and you think you have, but you haven't been, well, it isn't going to work. Now the Air Force made a study on it. In the first part of the Air Force, you know, they had the helicopter pilots who were spraying this stuff, and they were covered, and pilots and the guys who were running these sprayers and so forth, they were covered with Agent Orange. And the Air Force couldn't find any Agent Orange casualties in their service. So, you know, it stands to reason that it may not necessarily be Agent Orange that would cause something like that.
Right.
But it also could, though. That's the whole thing.
Right.
And so it's a doubt, and they have to go through all the paperwork.
Sure.
It takes time to go through paperwork. And they have to do the research to find out what outfit they were in, when they were there, and when the Agent Orange was sprayed, and how long it was there, and things like that.
Okay, let's skip right back to where we left off now. We kind of got into what sounds like you've been doing a lot of that VA thing for a long time, Veterans Administration thing. So we understand after 1946 when you came out here and how that happened. Now let's step back. Let's step back to this, why we're here in a way. And that is, some people are just lucky, some people are born lucky. You know, who knows what the reasons are, but you know, and you were one of the thousands that landed on the beaches at Normandy.
Right.
And you were in what? How many waves were there, and what wave were you in? Do you remember?
There was the first wave and then the second one.
Okay, were you in the first or the second wave?
I was neither one, really. I have to tell you this. I was supposed to be in the second wave. I was on a LCI to be on the second wave. The LCI is the boat that has the ramps that goes down both sides.
Yes.
And it's a boat that goes up on the beach, but it's got 200 men on it.
Right.
Well, naturally, that's the boat that's going to be used for the second wave.
I got you.
The first wave landed in Higgins boats, the ones that are the assault troops. You know.
Those are the ones that flap down in the front.
Right. And so the first wave got pinned down on the beach. So they said they needed more men on the beach immediately. They didn't want to wait for the second wave. They wanted more men on the beach immediately. So when the Higgins boats came back, my squad was excess baggage on the LCI I was on because it was on the headquarters. Our company more than filled the LCI that they were on. So it was the third squad, third platoon, so I got put on the LCI with the headquarters. And when they came back, why, the Higgins boat pulls up, and my squad's ordered out into the Higgins boat to go in. Well, my order to when I was to go in landing, when I got there, I was supposed to take my squad and go in and reconnoiter the city of Trevieres. Well, that order never changed. You know, when I got on this Higgins boat, all I know is that I'm going in a little sooner than I would have normally. But then we get out there, and we joined the first wave. In other words, they were pinned down on the beach. That's
Right.
what happened.
Right.
So I called mine the intermittent wave.
Yeah, you're the wave and a half.
Yeah.
Not wave 2, not wave
Yeah.
1, but wave and a half.
I got there halfway between, I would say, the first wave landed and when the second wave finally landed.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was in there about 2 hours ahead of or more of the second
Gotcha,
wave.
gotcha.
And so I had to go up through all that chaos of all these guys that are wounded and dead on this. We had to blow the last row of wire. That's how close we were being to with the first wave, you know. And
So there was still barbed wire across the water.
right, there was 2 Bangalore torpedo men who were pinned down, and they hadn't blown the last row of wire. And there was anybody following until we came up. And when we came up, then we told them that we wanted them to blow the wire for us, so we'd fire up into the trenches. And they said that they were pinned down. And I said, well, we'll fire up there, and we did. And as soon as one guy got up, he got killed. The other one did twist the Bangalore torpedo under the wire, and it breached the wire. And of course, I rushed my squad through it.
Right.
And I got my whole squad off of that beach without a casualty, which was practically unheard of at that time of the day.
You bet.
Because when the second wave came in afterwards, they had 30% casualties.
First wave had what, 50? 50%.
To the units who are making the assault, to them, a lot of them, it was 100% casualties. Some platoons were completely wiped out, some squads completely wiped out, some companies.
Let's put it in perspective. They, on Omaha Beach alone, can they kind of, this is an Omaha Beach.
Yes.
How many soldiers actually, between all the different waves, actually landed on Omaha Beach? Do you know? About?
Well, before the day was over, a heck of a lot of them.
Uh-huh. Would you say 10,000 or more, or 20,000, or
Maybe 6,000 or 7,000.
just on Omaha Beach?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
just in that particular area, yes.
right.
Because we had divisions down on the right, and we had the English up on the left, and so forth. So all total, there was a lot of soldiers on that beach that day.
Okay.
I really don't know
the numbers. Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
But
I
book here, I look it up. But
Sure.
Walt, I'm going to be reading your citation. It's an honor to be able to do this when we're done here, but how has winning the Medal of Honor changed your life?
Well, you know, people have asked me, you know, and before I got the Medal of Honor, I didn't know I had a life. In other words, I really, you know, I take life as it comes, and I don't know how it would have changed it, except that I know that it's given me a lot of benefits that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, that's for sure. And so therefore, it's probably made life better for me. But I don't know that it changed my life.
For those people
Because
that
I think that I would have done all right without it.
Well, for those people that don't know, in the history of the United States, less than 3,700 people have ever been honored
Yes.
with this particular award. And of those 3,700 that have been awarded it, how many are there, Larry?
Maybe around 150 survivors?
It's about 50-50. And in some places, maybe, you know, like Somalia, it was 100%. Because there's only 2 Medal of Honors and they were both killed.
Right, some people got
Yeah,
multiple
posthumous.
awards, but right now, let's just say there's not that many of you guys left.
There's only 137 living out of all of the wars.
That's what I was going to say. And now, do you guys have your reunions all the time?
We have them once a year now. We
Right.
used to have them every other year, but we were so many dying every year, we decided we better have it every year.
So you're talking about a country now with almost 300 million people, and there's 137 so honored individuals
Right.
based on, as you would
It's an
say,
incredible honor.
sometimes it was the luck, sometimes it was...
It's an incredible honor. In the first place, it's not an easy thing to get because when you're recommended for it, it's got to go through your company commander, and then it's got to go to the battalion, it's got to go to regiment, and then to division, then division to Army and Corps and so forth, and then or Army or Corps, then to Army, and then to Pentagon.
So Eisenhower signed off on yours,
right,
huh?
and no, and
Oh.
then to I don't know about that, but and that went to you know, the Pentagon, and then the Pentagon sends it to Congress, and Congress has to make the final approval.
Wow.
Well, when did you find out that you were going to be distinguished by being granted this honor?
I found out about it when I read about it on the train. I was wounded in the hurricane force in October of 1944.
And where was that forest?
Hurricane force is in Germany.
In Germany.
Yeah. And Germany or Belgium, I'm sure it was in Germany then because we crossed the Siegfried line.
Sure.
And so anyway, when I got wounded, they sent me back to the hospital in Paris, and then I finally got well enough to come back, and I was on a train going back to the outfit. And there's a guy on the train, he's reading the newspaper, and he was from my brother's company, and he knew us both by our last names, but he didn't know our first names. So he's reading, and he's just assuming that he's reading about my brother, and he said, "Hey, Ehlers, I'm reading here where your brother got the Medal of Honor," and I said, "I'm reading that too." But I didn't tell him it was me he was reading about because I hadn't gotten the Medal of Honor yet. That's the first I knew about it.
You bring up something so important that we didn't really dwell on. I don't think it's good to, but I want to just mention it that, you know, you and your brother had gone through so much through those days, and from October 4th of 1940 to June 6th of June 1944, and he was on one of the boats in the second wave, is that right?
He was on the second wave at the K Company, and they got a direct hit on the boat on the ramp that he and his squad were coming down.
And so he was killed right then and there before you.
Well, you know, I don't know exactly how soon he was killed, but he died on the beach that day, and they said he was killed in action on the beach. So.
Oh, he made it to the beach.
Well, yeah, they were coming down down the ramp.
Oh, I
so
see.
The boat was up on it, and so what has happened? They have, and you know, I knew all those guys in his squad because I was actually the section leader of that squad before I got transferred.
Sure,
out of the company.
sure.
And I knew a lot of people in their company. Our company commander got killed. He came in with the second wave.
Right.
And and then the executive officer who happened to become Captain Folk was our company commander from then on, and he's the one that actually wrote up my citation along with the affidavits he had from all 12 men of my squad.
Yeah, right.
And so.
But when did you find? I guess what everyone would want to know is when did you find out about your brother's passing?
And I found that out. They told me he was missing in action. I told him, well, he wouldn't be missing in action. He'd either be dead or he'd be in a hospital somewhere, seriously wounded or something.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, when did you find that out?
They notified me on July the 14th. His company commander came over.
That's when it was official.
Notified me that it was official, that he was official.
But how long did they hold you out? So it was held out from the so they were really holding you out from June 6th when you landed till the 14th. You didn't know where your brother was.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So
I just always had hopes that he would live.
Yeah, he'd show up somewhere.
The residuals of that, though, is that I had dreams for 50 years that he was coming back. Every night he'd visit me in his dreams, and he'd go away the same way, you know.
Sure.
And the thing is that it took a long time to get over having that kind of a nightmare, but that's not really a nightmare. I think it was kind of a blessing.
Yes. Well, anyway, because one of the things...
Like always, he let me off easy.
I was going to say, he made you stay and do the duty. He made you stay and do your guard duty.
Let me jump in here, Ron. I know that Roland was you looked up to Roland, but
yeah.
Other than Roland, who was your childhood hero, or did you have a childhood hero?
Well, you know, we never thought much about heroes except maybe Babe Ruth. You know, that's the only one.
Hey, this is news. This is news. Babe Ruth was Walt Ehlers' childhood hero.
So the follow-up is, how would you define a hero today?
Yeah.
A hero Well, the true hero, of course, is the guy who puts his life on the line to save other people's lives, and then in our case, so it's above and beyond the call of duty. But that's the case in most heroes that are doing something like that. Now, a basketball star, he may be a basketball hero, but he's getting high paid for that status. And that's not considered, I don't think, he's a professional hero. And there's a difference between a professional hero and a military hero, because a lot of us weren't professionals when we became heroes, or what they consider as a hero. We don't call ourselves heroes, so.
Walt, I know you don't call yourself a hero.
Most of us say that our heroes are those who paid the supreme sacrifice, and I consider my brother to be my biggest hero. He paid the supreme sacrifice.
One of the things that we've gone through. You're not only did you come back and have to face all of these things, but then you find a few years later we go into the Korean War. A few years later than that we come back into the Vietnam War. A few years later than that we go to the Gulf War. And now we're engaged in another incursion. In each one of these cases, your heart must go out to every soldier that's on the ground doing their job.
Listen, I have a son right now over in Bosnia, helping keep the peace.
Is he Army?
He's Army.
All right.
Keep it in
Okay.
Army. Yeah.
Very good. So tell us what do you think of after you received the Congressional Medal of Honor, you became political. You became something that people wanted to see.
I stayed out of politics.
Did you have to go on bond tours and that kind of thing, or you didn't do? They didn't ask you to do anything.
So there was quite a few of us then, there were some guys, I guess, that went, but
So you never felt that it was just a PR stunt, that they could use you. I mean, they bring up Audie Murphy all the time because I guess he said in some book that he felt that he was being used and tooled around.
I don't think I should go on tape about Audie Murphy, but he's a great guy and he did a great job. But he also had a tremendous public relations group.
Yeah, I was going to say. Anyway, moving on to let's talk about today. Let's talk about right now. How long have you lived here in Garden Grove?
This is Buena Park, by the way.
Oh, well, I better get the right city.
Yeah.
How long have you lived in Buena Park?
I've lived here 48 years.
48 years.
My wife and I got married in March '55. We moved in this house in April '55.
God love you. Now,
I bought it in '54, though. I bought it in November of '54.
So how many lovely children do you have?
I had 3 children, and I have 11 grandchildren.
And 11 grandchildren.
And all of them very beautiful children. I am so lucky, you know. It's just.
And you've been living here in Orange County since 1948.
Right.
So your orange groves were right here in your backyard.
Oh, they're right across the street.
Yeah.
In the backyard was the other houses, and over here was a farm, where the church is. That was a farm. And for a while, we even got strawberries from it, and cabbages. Of course, we got to smell the cabbages too. But that was a farm, and then the church bought the land, and they had too much land, so they sold it to the dentist's office down there, part of it.
Yeah.
And now that's a church, and quite a bit of property back there hasn't been used for anything yet. I don't know what. There's a lot of weeds on it right now.
So, do you ever wonder? I just waxing a little bit poetic here. You were in a situation after you landed on the beach and you got up into all of the things that you had to do in your citation there. Everybody wants to know this one too. Was there any thought in your mind when you were doing that, or was it just automatic pilot?
I was more or less on automatic pilot, doing what I felt my job was to do, and actually to try and save my men, from getting killed and things like this. And actually, one man did get killed on that day, though. He got killed in the hedgerow there, and the other one that he and I, who were firing in a semicircle, when I returned our backs to go, and I saw him putting in a machine gun down in the corner of the field from which we were coming out of. So I was busy picking off those 3 guys when I got hit in the back, and it kind of spun me around, and I saw a German up in the hedgerow. I shot him, and it knocked me down. When I got hit, I was knocked down, and I shot him while I was falling. And then I got up, and I saw the automatic rifle laying up there, and so I went over and I got him and carried him back to the hedgerow behind us, and then I went back and got the rifle. But I had to go get the rifle because it's the only automatic weapon we had.
You betcha, you betcha.
Well, let me ask you a question. Obviously, you enlisted as a private, and you received the Battlefield Commission. What rank did you retire at?
I didn't retire. I got discharged from the military service. Yeah, I got an honorable discharge in October the 16th, 1945.
Was that as a first or second lieutenant?
Second lieutenant. I was still second lieutenant. The interesting thing is in March 1945, they put me in for first lieutenant, and they came back from headquarters and said I didn't have enough combat as an officer to be a first lieutenant. And my company commander and the battalion commander were furious. And then, of course, I got wounded after that. Of course, all that kind of stuff went one way. I'm sure they would have went after it, but then when I got back, then the war ended, and so nothing happened. And then when in September, I got this directive from the President of the United States that says that anybody with the Medal of Honor could request a discharge. I knew I was in for the duration because I was an officer then, see. And so I said, I'm going to request a discharge. Commander said, oh, you can't do that. I said, it says here I can. And so he said, let's go talk to the battalion commander. So we went to talk to the battalion commander. He said, well, he said, you can do that, but he said, we got great plans for you. I said, I know you have. But I'm going to exercise my rights. So I'm taking a discharge.
Fantastic. Because, you know, everybody thinks about the citizen soldier, you know. And of course, I got drafted in July of 1967 and got out in July of '69.
Yeah.
And you know, everyone wonders, you know, about service to your country. And I'll tell you what, it's for those that don't know, you just have to go. There's just no other choice. You just have to go. But once you've done what you have to do, that's it.
I have to tell you though, I got my draft notice in Africa. And it says if you don't report for the draft, you're going to be arrested. And I said, well, come and get me. I was just ready to go out of there right then.
Hey, Walt,
but they didn't come after me.
Well, for the benefit of our viewers who have never seen the citation, and I only saw it since you and I met recently, I'd like to read this. The President of the United States, in the name of the Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Ehlers Walter D., rank and organization, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, 18th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division, place and dare, near Gauville, France, 9/10 June 1944. Entered service at Manhattan, Kansas. Birth, Junction City, Kansas, GO number 91, 19 December 1944. Citation, for conspicuous gallantry and integrity at the risk of his own life, above and beyond the call of duty, on 9/10 June 1944, near Gauville, France, Staff Sergeant Ehlers, always acting as a spearhead of the attack, repeatedly led his men against heavily defended enemy strongpoints, exposing himself to deadly hostile fire whenever the situation required heroic and courageous leadership. Without waiting for an order, Staff Sergeant Ehlers, far ahead of his men, led his squad against a strongly defended enemy strongpoint, personally killing 4 of an enemy patrol who attacked him en route. Then crawling forward under withering machine gun fire, he pounced upon the gun crew and put it out of action. Turning his attention to 2 mortars protected by the crossfire of 2 machine guns, Staff Sergeant Ehlers led his men through this hail of bullets to kill or put to flight the enemy of the mortar section, killing 3 men himself. After mopping up the mortar positions, he again advanced on a machine gun, his progress effectively covered by his squad. When he was almost on top of the gun, he leaped to his feet, and although greatly outnumbered, he knocked out the position single-handed. The next day, having advanced deep into enemy territory, the platoon of which Staff Sergeant Ehlers was a member, finding itself in untenable position as the enemy brought increased mortar, machine guns, and small arms fire to bear on it, was ordered to withdraw. Staff Sergeant Ehlers, after a squad had covered the withdrawal of the remainder of the platoon, stood up and by continuous fire at the semicircle of enemy placements, diverted the bulk of the heavy hostile fire on himself, thus permitting the members of his own squad to withdraw. At this point, though wounded himself, he carried his wounded automatic rifleman to safety and then returned fearlessly over the shell-swept field to retrieve the automatic rifle, which he was unable to carry previously. After having his wound treated, he refused to be evacuated and returned to lead his squad. The intrepid leadership, indomitable courage, and fearless aggressiveness displayed by Staff Sergeant Ehlers in the face of overwhelming enemy forces serve as an inspiration to others, close quote. It's an honor to be here with you today, sir.
Thank you.
Medal of Honor winner, Walter.
Recipient.
Recipient, that's
That's
correct.
what they say.
Medal of Honor recipient. And that's so true. And we're so honored to have you with us today on the cutting edge. Thank you so much, Walt
Thank you.
Ehlers.
I didn't mean to correct you, but I did.
You better do it every time.